Hi guys, today we're going to talk about all the books that I'm anticipating in the second half of 2023. July is upon us, which means we are now solidly into the second half of the year. Book news has come out since the last time I did an anticipated releases video, so I wanted to go over books that are coming out July through December of this year that I'm really excited about. First up, we have The 7-Year Slip, which comes out on July 4th by Ashley Poston. This is another one of her sort of paranormal-ish romances. She came out with The Dead Romantics last year, which was like a ghost romance. And this is like a time slip one. So it's not like that the people themselves are supernatural or anything, but like the situation is. I believe this follows a couple that is occupying the same apartment, but in different years, 7 years apart, and they don't know why this time slip is happening. So yeah, he exists 7 years in the past, and one day she finds him just like standing in her apartment, and she's like very confused, but then they find out that she's 7 years in the future. And apparently her aunt always said that the apartment was a pinch in time, a place where moments blended together like watercolors. So sparks fly between these two, and it says, after all, love is never a matter of time, but a matter of timing. So I think that's a really interesting premise. Like I said, I liked The Dead Romantics, so I definitely want to pick up this next romance by Ashley Poston. Then we have Darkwater Daughter coming out July 11th. I believe this is by H.M. Long. They also put out Hall of Smoke and Temple of No God, which I believe are like loosely related. I did not pick those ones up, but this one in particular sounds really interesting to me. It's like a pirate adventure, and I just think that's so fun. So the little blurb for the premise says, a storm singer and a pirate hunter join forces against a deathless pirate lord in this swashbuckling Jacobean adventure on the high seas. It seems like there's a little bit of magic. The main character's voice can still hurricanes and shatter armadas, so that's a really cool power, and I'm interested to see like how that works in this story. I don't know. And then her partner is a disgraced naval officer. I always like a disgraced sort of soldier as well. I think that's a really interesting character dynamic. That sort of quest to regain their honor kind of thing is always interesting to read about. So it sounds like an interesting pair. And after the adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, I'm really looking forward to more pirate fantasy stories. I think that there's so much promise in that. So I think this one has a lot of potential, and I've seen some really rave reviews for this one so far, so I'm really excited for that. Then we have Silver Nitrate by Silvia Moreno Garcia coming out July 18th. This is obviously her new book. I'm very excited. It's like a horror novel, I believe, this time around. She also has like a very wide breadth of genres that she explores. But this one seems to be a horror novel. I believe it is set in Mexico City, like a lot of her other books are, but we tackle film and the filmmaking process, and I think it's like haunted film reels. So Goodreads mentions that this story is a fabulous meld of Mexican horror movies and Nazi occultism, a dark thriller about the curse that haunts a legendary lost film and awakens one woman's hidden powers. And her and another character work to unravel a mystery about the film and the obscure occultist who once roamed their own city. And they find out that sorcerers and magic are not only the stuff of movies. I'll pretty much read anything Silvia Moreno Garcia puts out, but the fact that she's tackling like a haunted film is so cool to me. I went to school for film, and I really enjoy that stuff. It kind of makes me think of that scene in Inglourious Basterds for some reason where she lights the films on fire, but especially like the Nazi angle as well, so kind of intersects with that. But I think this is going to be a great time, and I'm sure it'll have lovely writing as her books normally do, and I'm very much looking forward to this one. I'm going to try to fit it in this summer reading-wise, but my TBR for July is already so packed, and I did not account for new releases, so Another favorite author of mine is coming out with a book this summer, and that is Thornhedge by T. Kingfisher, which comes out August 15th. Another arc I requested and was denied by T. Kingfisher. I've not been approved for a single one of her arcs. I'll get over it eventually. And this one seems to have a very like quirky fairy tale premise. It's a bit of a departure of some of the more like horror-y stuff she's been putting out lately. And the premise says that there's a princess trapped in a tower. This isn't her story. Meet Toadling. On the day of her birth, she was stolen from her family by fairies, but she grew up safe and loved in the warm waters of fairyland. Once an adult, though, the Fae ask a favor of return to the human world and offer a blessing of protection to the newborn child. But nothing with fairies is ever simple. Again, it seems very whimsical. I think it's on the shorter side. It seems to be a novella. Yes, Goodreads says it's 128 pages, so that's really short. Wow. But I like her take on like fairy tale-esque stuff. Nettle and Bone was one of my favorite books by her, and she always does a good job of kind of like turning things on their head. So I'm really excited for this one. I'm really appreciative that she puts out so much because I do love her writing quite a bit. So I think this one's really gonna click with me. Then we have a duet with the Siren Duke that comes out also on August 15th. This is by Elise Kova, and it's part of her Married to Magic series. They're all standalones that take place within the same universe, and they all have a love interest that is of a different sort of magical origin. So the first one was Deal with the Elf King, the second one was Dance with the Fae Prince, and then the third one was Duel with the Vampire Lord, I believe. And they've all been really fun so far. I'm not entirely sure what the setup for Siren Duke is. I don't know if our main character... they must be human because they're all human so far, so I don't know how a human is going to have a relationship with a siren, but we'll see. Like I said, these have just been like really fun, like escapist romances. They're like really, I appreciate that they're all like lightly connected because the world building, obviously, like you don't have to read them all in order, but the world builds upon itself as you do. I've really been enjoying this series, so I'm excited for the new one. I'm a little sad she hasn't come out with the cover yet. It feels like it's cutting it very close. Usually covers come out way before release, but where she's an indie author, I get it. But I'm really excited to see what this cover looks like, though all of them have been incredible so far. Also coming out August 15th, which seems to be shaping up to be a really big release Tuesday, is This Cursed Light by Emily Theed, the sequel to This Vicious Grace. I had so much fun with that book last year. I got an audio arc of it, and the narrator was incredible. This story has a very like Italian influence and like uses a lot of Italian words, and the narrator just did such a beautiful job really helping kind of put me in that world. So our main character in the series is Alessa, and she is the sort of chosen one meant to save her peoples from this apocalyptic event called I believe El Devorando, and for some reason, the powers that she has aren't working correctly. She's meant to amplify her partner's power through touch, but for some reason, her partners have all been dying, like, pretty quickly. She seems to be kind of overloading their system or something. And she teams up with a man named Dante to protect her because her people are kind of starting to turn against her. And it's very intense and like just very action-packed. The romance was so good. I love that like, I can't touch you or I'll kill you sort of tension. It's so much fun, and that book left off on such a huge cliffhanger, so I'm really excited to see what this next book does. I'm not entirely sure if this is a duology or part of a larger series, but I will read as many books in this series as Emily Theed decides to put out because it is so fun, and it's really the perfect summer read too. I think like that Italian influence makes me like think of the Mediterranean and stuff, and they're drinking limoncello and they're on like an island, and it's really transportive. So she does a great job really setting the scene and making me want to be drinking some sort of fruity alcoholic drink by the pool. So really excited for this one, and I can't wait to see what happens. Another sequel I am highly anticipating is Foxglove by Adeline Grace. This comes out August 22nd, and this is a sequel to Belladonna, which is one of my favorite reads of the year so far. This story follows Signa, who for some reason seems immune to death. This really catastrophic event happened with her family when she was a baby, and when Death went to collect her soul, he found he couldn't. So he's been intrigued by her ever since. The story has obviously a personification of death kind of character, which I absolutely eat up. I love that premise for some reason, and as Signa grows up, the relatives that take her in kind of all start to mysteriously die, and she's like really fed up with it. Like death just seems to follow her wherever she goes, and she wants him to just leave until she doesn't. So it was so much fun. There was like a murder mystery, and it was like gothic, and oh my gosh, again, the romance was so good. So I'm really looking forward to Foxglove. Sort of like this Vicious Grace, Belladonna had such a like, oh my god, cliffhanger that I was just like, immediately, I need this next book. I don't think they're doing any arcs for it though, and I'm devastated. So I need this book to come out like yesterday. It was one of the most fun reading experiences I've had in a really long time with Belladonna. So I'm hoping Foxglove is just as good. This is the second book in a trilogy, I'm pretty sure. I know the third one is called Wisteria. I don't know if there's anything coming or following that one. So I know I have a bad track record with knowing the details about a series and whatnot, but I feel pretty confident about that one. Then on August 29th, we have Vampires of El Norte. This is Isabel Cañas's, I believe, second book. She had the Hacienda come out last year, I think, or the year before, which was pretty popular, and I do mean to get around to that one, but this one piques my interest a little bit more. The Goodreads blurb says that vampires and vaqueros face off on the Texas-Mexico border in this supernatural western from the author of the Hacienda. So yeah, it's historical with vampires, and I love that. It's a western. I don't really typically read that genre, but like, I'm already sold. I think that's gonna be really cool, and her previous work, the Hacienda, seemed to be like a gothic romance thriller, which again, I do want to read at some point because that is definitely up my alley. I saw it compared a lot to Mexican Gothic, which is a book that I loved. So this author seems very promising to me, and I hope Vampires of El Norte is excellent because I think it sounds really cool. So on September 5th, we have Assistant to the Villain, which I believe is the debut novel of Hannah Nicole Mayer. I think I saw somewhere that she was like on TikTok. I'm curious to see if it also gets big on TikTok. It says that it's Once Upon a Time meets The Office, so it's like a sunshine grumpy romance with an evil villain and their assistant. Which just sounds incredible. I really hope that leans into like the humor of the situation, because I think that setup sounds so funny. The little first paragraph of the blurb says, Assistant wanted. Notorious high-ranking villain seeks loyal, level-headed assistant for unspecified office duties, supporting staff for random mayhem, terror, and other dark things in general. Discretion is a must. Excellent benefits. This is from the same imprint that put out Fourth Wing, which is a little book, I don't know if you've heard about it. It's taken the internet by storm. So I'm expecting this one to also have a really strong release, even though it is a debut novel. The first edition also has the sprayed edges, which is interesting for a paperback release, but I'm into it. I think this sounds like a lot of fun, and I pretty much want to read it immediately, and hopefully it lives up to my own self-imposed hype. I know just because it's from the same imprint as another very popular book doesn't mean this is going to be excellent or even popular, but I think it has a lot of promise, so I really like the sound of the setup. And then coming out on September 19th is another villain sort of story by a more established author, John Scalzi, and I think this main character inherits like a villain business from their uncle, and it seems so bizarre, like in John Scalzi fashion. So the blurb mentions that inheriting your mysterious uncle's supervillain business is more complicated than you might imagine. Sure, there are things you'd expect: the undersea volcano layers, the minions, the plots to take over the world, the international network of rivals who want you dead. Much harder to get used to are the sentient language-using, computer-savvy cats. And the fact that in the overall organization, their management... This book sounds so bizarre. I have an arc of it that I'm hoping to get to this month, so I hope it lives up to that premise because I just think that's so funny. I don't know why all of a sudden we're getting like an influx of these more funny villain-esque stories. It reminds me of Megamind, and so I'm here for it. There's another book that came out a couple years ago called Hench that is sort of similar to both of those two, where like a character looking for a job I believe, starts working for a supervillain. So you get more their side of the story, and I just think that's a really interesting setup. It's a fun plot twist, so I hope these two are excellent, because I just love that idea so much. Probably one of the biggest releases of the year comes out on September 26th, which is the day after my birthday. Thanks, V.E. Schwab. And that is the Fragile Threads of Power, the continuation of the Darker Shades of Magic series. I don't know exactly what's going to be happening with this next phase of the Shades of Magic series. The first 3 books kind of follow the same trio of characters. There are these 4 alternate worlds that all share a London, and one of our characters is from Grey London, which is our world. Her name's Lila. And she ends up finding a way to Red London, which is another character's world, Kel, who is an Antari, and he can travel between the 4 Londons, unlike any other magician, and drama and dark magic ensue. So it's a really fun series. It's kind of like a modern classic fantasy at this point. V.E. Schwab is incredibly popular, so I'd be surprised if you haven't heard of this series. This new, sequel series seems to have a new character with, a different set of powers introduced, so I'm curious to see how that impacts the Threads, or the Shades of Magic world as we know it, and how it impacts our beloved characters. I could really use some more Rye and Alucard, personally, so I hope we get that. Moving into October, we have Starling House by Alex E. Harrow coming out on the 3rd. This was originally supposed to be published on Halloween, but for some reason it got moved up, so that's cool. This is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. Alex E. Harrow has been a little hit or miss for me, but the premise of this book alone sounds really cool. It seems very gothic. I've seen one review that's like, but what if we rot together in this old house is a love language? That alone sold me, so thank you to that Goodreads reviewer. But specifically, Goodreads mentions that this book is a contemporary gothic fairy tale about a small town haunted by the history it can't quite seem to bury, and the canny, clever woman who finds herself drawn to the house that sits at the crossroads of it all. That's all I need to know. That is the exact type of story I like, especially in the fall, which is when this comes out, so great timing, Alex E. Harrow. I hope this is just oozing gothic, just darkness and romance. I think she's got the chops to write this story really well, and a lot of the early reviews I've seen have been very positive, so looking forward to that one. And then on the 17th of October, we have A Bright Heart by Kate Chenley. I had not heard of this book until I saw it on NetGalley. The cover really sold me, but then the premise that I read on NetGalley was also incredible. What if you could get a chance to avenge your own murder? Ming-Shin outsmarted 3 princes to help the man she loved become king, but she doesn't see his betrayal coming, not until she's lying in a pool of her own blood on the palace steps. As she's dying, Ming-Shin makes a desperate plea to the gods to turn back time and give her a chance to make things right. She wakes up 2 years earlier, her prayer granted, and swears 2 things. Her lover will never become king, and she will never fall in love again. I love that. I constantly think of, how cool would it be if you could go back in the past, with the memory of the time that you lived in the future and, do things a little differently. I like the court intrigue aspect of this so much, and I hope it lives up to its premise, because it sounds so cool. I did get approved for an arc of this, so hopefully reading it soon. And again, just hoping that it's as good as it sounds, because I think that premise is so good, and I will be devastated if it disappoints. Then on October 24th, we have A Curse for True Love by the one and only Stephanie Garber. This is the 3rd book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series, and I believe it's the final book. The last book left off on a huge cliffhanger, so I was screaming when I was reading the end of that book. So that was one that I immediately wanted to pick up the next one, and the fact that we've had to wait a year is criminal. This is another one that's not doing any arcs, so that's a bit disappointing, but I understand why. It's a really huge release, and you don't want spoilers on the internet. This series follows our main character Evangeline as she kind of gets wrapped up in very whimsical curses and political plots, and whimsical is just the word that I go to for this series, because it really is. There's a lot of dark stuff happening, but in this very fairy tale-esque way. She crosses paths with Jax, who is the fate of broken hearts, and he manipulates her to his doings, but they also have a very intriguing spark, and she can never tell like when he's being genuine, and it's so intriguing. I love it so much. It's so messy and dramatic, but I love it. Like, the Caraval series was incredible, and she's just amplified it to 1,000 in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. It's just been such a fun ride, so I can't wait to see how this one wraps up, because I think I'm just gonna be screaming the entire time. Then we have a prequel coming out on November 7th, Bookshops and Bonedust. This is the, like I said, prequel to Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree, another book that took the internet by storm last year. This was the beginning of like the cozy fantasy hype train, which I very happily and quickly jumped on. I was a little late to coming around to Legends and Lattes specifically, but I have read it and it was fantastic. It lived up to the hype for the most part. So this one follows Viv before she decides to retire from her, banditing life. And I think she's injured and like ends up helping out in a bookshop for a really long time. And we follow that bit and like maybe how it helped her come to be the person that she is in Legends and Lattes. I am really sad that some of our characters that I fell in love with in Legends and Lattes presumably won't be in this book, but I have every faith in Travis Baldree of writing other very lovable characters, and I am so looking forward to this. Especially I think November is the perfect time for a cozy fantasy like this, because you just want to like curl up with a cute little book. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to that one. And then finally for this list, coming out November 14th, we have Calamity by Constance Fay. This is like the first book in Bramble, the new imprint, I think by Tor, that is more like romance inspired, is putting out. I think they do have one Jennifer L. Armentrout book that's coming out with Bramble first, but that's like a series sequel, and so this is the first like original title under this imprint. So this is a sci-fi romance, which I feel like we don't see quite as often for like genre mashups. I see a lot of like sci-fi action adventures, sci-fi thrillers, but sci-fi romance, I'm intrigued. It says she's got a ramshackle spaceship, a misfit crew, and a big problem with its sexy newest member. Temperance Reed, banished from the wealthy and dangerous 15 Families, just wants to keep her crew together after their feckless captain ran off with the intern. But she's drowning in debt, and revolutionary new engine technology is about to make her beloved ship obsolete. Enter Arcadio Escajeda, second child of the terrifying Escajeda family. He's the thorn in Temper's side as they're set off on a scouting mission in the backwater desert planet of Herschel 2. They throw sparks every time they meet, but Temper's suspicions of his ulterior motives only serve to fuel the flames between them. So I love that this is like a romance with like, it seems like a very active plot. It's not just about the romance, but I am very intrigued. I was really excited to see when Bramble became a thing. I think romantasy has taken the literary world by storm in the last couple of years, and I'm really excited to see what authors continue to do with that. And I wasn't expecting their first one to be a sci-fi, but I'm into it. This has been the year of sci-fi for me, so I think that's very promising, and it sounds like a lot of fun. So I'm hoping it's a good mix of that action adventure and like, steamy, tensiony love stuff, because I like that shit. And that wraps up my anticipated reads for the rest of the year. There's still maybe a couple announcements that haven't like dropped yet, but where it's already July, I wanted to get this video up. Hopefully these are all good. I try not to overhype new releases for myself. This list has been pared down a lot from like a wider range, and these are the ones that I'm like definitely picking up. So let me know which ones down below that you are really excited to read in particular, or maybe something that I missed and, you think is worth a mention. I'd love to hear your recommendations. Leave that comment, like this video, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, have a lovely day.